This is 15-Minute Fundamentals, where we interview core contributors within crypto and gain insights into their day-to-day operations. In this episode, I'm joined by Andriy, co-founder of Allbridge, a cross-chain bridge between both EVM and non-EVM chains. To cover the basics, bridges are smart contract-based exchanges that allow for the permissionless movement of assets across different Layer 1 and Layer 2 blockchains. The problem that bridges solve is that it's currently difficult to put valuable collateral assets, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, to work on multiple different chains without relying on centralized intermediaries. Bridges bring down the cost of moving assets across chains to one function call. This means that it's possible to unlock the economic bandwidth of high-value collateral, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, on multiple different chains. The bridge market was initially dominated by custodial bridges, like centralized exchanges and custodians, Binance, Coinbase, BitGo, etc. It's obvious why a multi-chain crypto industry can't rely on only centralized bridges at scale, which is why we've seen so many decentralized and non-custodial bridges being built right now. The primary business model for bridges is to generate revenue by taking a cut of the trading fees paid by traders. That is, the bridge takes a portion of the liquidity provider's revenue. In this episode with Andriy, we discuss what Allbridge is and what makes it unique, how their products work under the hood, we assess the market opportunity and Allbridge's approach to building a sustainable business, we discuss ensuring the technical and economic security of a bridge, team behind the project, current challenges, and more. Hello, Andriy. Welcome to 15-Minute Fundamentals. It is super great to have you on.
Thank you so much for inviting. It is my real pleasure to be here.
Of course. And today we're going to be diving into the details behind Allbridge. But before we do that, could you just give a quick introduction?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Andriy. I'm co-founder and CEO at Allbridge. We founded our company together with my partner in 2021, and we have been focusing on building the bridges ever since. Today, I think we have the largest expertise in connecting EVM chains to non-EVM chains, but I'm sure we will go deeper into that further down our interview. And just a few words about myself. I came to crypto in 2015, and before that I've been involved in information technologies. I've been building data centers here and there. Particularly, I am Cisco guy, specializing in networking and switching, Cisco certified network professional. Have done a lot of work for bridging together the network infrastructure, which ultimately I think led me to this point of my life.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that background there as well. Now, to dive into Allbridge's purpose, how would you describe the problem that you have set out to solve?
So our ultimate goal it is to provide the decentralized way of connecting blockchains together. I mean, the moment you discover the bridging as the concept is that whenever you want to move one asset from one chain to the other, and for that purpose, you would love to, or you would want to, for some reasons, to avoid centralized exchanges, because we cannot not ignore the fact that whenever people deposit the funds to that exchange, they have the opportunity to withdraw them on the other chain. But if you want to do it properly decentralized, then you will turn to bridges. And when we started looking into bridging space, we discovered that the majority of bridges are just swapping the assets between the EVM chains, which is totally fine. And it is totally understandable from the technological perspective, because it is pretty much the same solidity contract that you redeploy. And we decided to take the harder route and to connect non-EVMs to EVMs, which I think it is pretty cool and interesting. And it gives us this opportunity to be in this market occupying our niche.
Okay, now let's dive into that harder path and what you have built to operate there. So it would be awesome if you can describe your core product, because there are a few, so that we understand your solution to the problem from all of the approaches that you picked.
Yeah, sure. So the original bridge, the one that we call Classic, it is the one we started with. And back in the days, it was not even called Allbridge. It was called Solbridge, because from day one, we connected Solana to a variety of chains. And then after some time, we thought that it is a good way to, not just focus on the Solana ecosystem alone, but we saw this opportunity to connect all the chains together. And so far, we've got 18 chains. I think we will have 20 chains by the end of April. I'm trying always to be careful whenever I promise anything tech related, but here I feel that April, it is a good month. We are actively finalizing right now Stellar Bridge, We are working with stacks. The stacks guy, they became really popular in the space after the punks came to Bitcoin using ordinals. But apart from that, we had Solana from day one. We had native Near. We've got XRP Ledger. We've got Waves. We worked with Casper. We worked with Terra. And we did a lot of super cool integrations for non-EVMs. I mean, we've got the majority of the main EVMs too, of course. But what I'm personally proud is that all those chains that other bridges are not connecting. This is our main product, the one we started with. And in its nature, it is traditional mint and burn bridge, which means that whenever you deposit the asset on one chain, you get this IOU, if we may call that, on the other chain. And this IOU is produced by the bridge, which is good, but it also leads to the confusion for the users because different bridges, they produce different assets because the smart contract of the bridge, it creates the asset in its own way. So when we discovered that for users, it is sometimes not so good experience, we started looking into other ways of doing that. And the next product that we deployed last year, it's what we call the Allbridge Core. It is the bridge for native stablecoins. So that means that I will give you like this example for the viewers that are maybe not in depth familiar with the bridges. So in traditional bridge architecture, if you take a USDC on Ethereum and let's say you want to move it to Solana, you will get this asset that will represent the USDC locked on Ethereum. And then you will need to discover where to take this asset to, if it is liquid, what are the trading pairs for it, if you can exchange it to the other assets. Now, on the contrary, for the bridges that are associated with liquidity pools, it means that whenever you put the asset on one chain, you get the real asset on the other one. And it is USDC that it's been owned by Circle. It is not some of the other versions of USDC from other bridges. It is sort of the real USDC. And we not only do the USDC to USDC conversion, we actually allow our users to select the asset and the chain. So you can take USDT on Tron and ultimately exchange it to USDC on Solana, or let's say DAI on Ethereum or whatsoever. So this is what we do, and this is what we are really proud of, because I think that for users, it is super cool and much more convenient to operate with native stable assets rather than with their wrapped versions.
That is a very fascinating. So you have both the classic burn and mint bridge option and then a native option for the stable coins out there. So that ties into my next question pretty well, which is that from your point of view, how would you describe the bridge market in general and your position within it? Because you have both these approaches.
So for me, like bridges that mint and burn are sort of the first generation of the bridges. Like this is how it all started. Whenever you start your own blockchain, for example, you probably will use your own mint and burn bridge just to make sure that the users are able to tap into your ecosystem. Now, over time, when users started complaining about not having enough liquidity for the wrapped assets or not understanding what wrapped assets are, or even this concept that we call the fragmentation of liquidity. So that means that the same asset transferred through different bridges would be the different asset on the destination chain. People started looking in what I call the second generation of the bridges. Those are the bridges that are associated with the liquidity pools, which are not subject to what we call liquidity fragmentation, when the same asset that's being brought by different bridges is not exactly the same asset on the destination chain anymore. And this is the way the market is moving right now. And I also wanted to mention that some of the bridges, they maintain the liquidity pools, and the other type of the bridges that are also out there, they provide what is called liquidity on demand. So whenever there is a request to fill in specific order, the market makers step in and they give their liquidity in exchange for this percentage of commission. Now, I have been reading a lot about those architecture. I think it has its ups and downs. So whenever the bridges do that, they claim to be much more financial efficient than the bridges that are maintaining liquidity pools, because they are saying that whenever liquidity is not in use, it is just sitting in the pool. Now, the down part of this approach, why I personally prefer to deal with liquidity pools, is that you cannot guarantee that the liquidity liquidity on demand will be provided to the user the moment that it's requested. You see, it is tricky. It's like, I do personally agree that liquidity just sitting in the pool is not a good thing, but at the same time, what if I want to transfer right now and someone would fill my order, let's say the next day? What do I do in this situation? I'm not entirely sure if that would work in those dramatic situations like the one we faced with USDC a couple of days before. It was like last weekend, right? Starting from Friday onwards until Monday. So I can very well imagine the case when in the market conditions like that, no one would be providing liquidity. So it would make it literally impossible to transfer the assets because all of the market makers, they don't want to be set up in this position. And if you do maintain the liquidity pools with the right formula, people will get the funds transferred with a discount, which would be reflecting the market conditions, but still the market would decide what's going to be the swapping price even for the stable asset. But at the same time, the transfer would still happen for those people who are willing to take this haircut. I'm not saying that they should. I mean, I didn't panic. I didn't jump from one asset to the other, but some people, they just want to get their liquidity no matter what, and they're prepared to pay the price. And I think it makes sense to give them this opportunity. I'm not even sure if it's been in the questions that we discussed before, but I think it is really a valid point, which represents where are we now and where we are building that. And last but not least, I see that our specific market, it is still the market when we connect non-EVMs to EVMs. For the stable swaps, it means including what we have already, like USDT on Tron, which is extremely popular stable in the eastern part of the world. We also got USDC on Solana because we originally have ties to Solana ecosystem. A lot of people are using that. But other than that, we want to make sure that we keep going and we keep adding other non-EVM chains. Like, let's say we're looking into Aptos and Sui. Maybe that would be one of those particular paths to go. Maybe other chains would emerge. And we don't want to be another Stargate Finance, which is super cool. And I deeply respect Brian and his team. And I know a lot about the layer zero tech and how they build it. But they still, for the Stargate, they prefer to stick to the EVM market alone. And I think that for users, it is important to have this choice of jumping between different techs.
Yeah, now that is all super fascinating. And tagging onto that you're kind of enabling the cross-chain future of the whole crypto ecosystem. I would love to hear how you at Allbridge are thinking about the market size and potential for a protocol that enables that frictionless transfer of assets between EVM and non-EVM chains.
So it is an interesting question. So if we come back to the previous point of our discussion when I mentioned mint and burn bridges are less sensitive in terms of the liquidity provided because you can print however large amount of tokens out of thin air just because of the deposit. So you don't need to worry about liquidity. And I have seen the transactions from Polygon to Solana, $50 million in one single transaction back in the days. So that means that generally it is billions of assets that can potentially be transferred between the chains if we do provide the sort of slippage that is affordable for the market and we provide the tag that is being really easy to use. But I think that the market capacity right now, if we have seen 50 million per single transaction on one single bridge per day, then potentially we can see overall market, the one, I mean, not the current market, but the market when it gets back to the proper, bull market, we can see billion worth of assets for stable coins being transferred per day. And it is realistic. I can imagine this future. And I don't think that it is too far from here.
Yep, I agree. I think that's a good take. Now, you've been speaking well about what's going on under the hood at a bit of a high level in both core and classic. I think I'd love to go a bit deeper into the smart contract infrastructure. And if you're okay with it, we could maybe focus on core here because that's the second generation. I think people are more familiar with the mint and burn models. So what are the most relevant and important smart contracts in Allbridge Core, and what do they do?
So what exactly we need to be doing when we are speaking about the bridges with liquidity pools? We need to maintain liquidity pool on one chain and on the other chain. So that would be like smart contract number one. Then between those chains, we need to maintain the messaging layer. So this is, you can think about it as the TCP/IP for blockchain infrastructure. That probably would be a good example. So it is about how do we make sure that our message is being transferred in the proper way. Here we took the approach of being a messaging protocol agnostic. You can either select our messaging or you can select Wormhole. We are right now working on integrating layer 0. We are working on integrating XLR. So we as the company, we don't really want to make our users tied to one selected messaging layer, because we think that our business model is transferring of value, not exactly the messaging. And I have encountered a lot of questions from the users like, can we trust your messaging? How can we make sure that it is proper decentralized? So my answer here is that you can trust our messaging, or you can select any messaging layer that you want. So for me as the business owner, it is not important which messaging you would use, because this fee that it is, the ground for our operations, it is not directly related to messaging. So we can now agree that we've got liquidity pool here, liquidity pool there, we've got messaging layer in between, and now we need this smart contract, this formula that will make sure that there is always enough liquidity. And to make sure that there is always enough liquidity, we are trying to make it from the perception that if we create this concept where, let's say, we've got a lot of liquidity in this pool and much less liquidity in that pool, then for people who would bridge the other way, because we cannot do that, we are non-custodials, we cannot take the liquidity for people and move it from here to there, but we can provide in depth of our economic model the incentive for other people to balance the liquidity pools. So how that works is that whenever we have less liquidity in some pool, that person that would move the liquidity to that pool, probably rebalancing it even with centralized exchanges. We are not, prohibiting our other users to do that. We just don't want to touch centralized exchanges ourselves. Will benefit from this transaction. And that means that it is similar to traditional arbitrage in crypto, but it's like sort of cross-chain arbitrage. So those users are balancing the liquidity for us, and that eventually means that our formula is working, because if other users are happy to do that, earning their share of the percentage, that means that we are doing our job, right?
Yes, exactly. So with the life cycle of a bridge transaction on Allbridge being clear now, if we tie that into your economic model next, could you describe how fees are distributed, who pays them, who earns them, and how value is captured by the protocol?
So we provide the whole breakdown for the fees in our interface, but you just have to remember that there are three parts to the fee. First, it is the gas price, which is not exactly related to the bridge, but it can be. I can speak about that more in details later on, because we allow our users to not only do the transaction, but also to exchange the gas token, making sure that not only the funds are being transferred, but the gas is being transferred too. But more of that later. Let's say we've got the gas part, then we've got the liquidity pools part, which is, again, it is not related to the bridge. It is just making sure that liquidity pools are balanced, and there is always someone willing to balance them out. And last but not least, it is 0.3% that we take as the bridge for the services, which is split like 0.15 on one chain and 0.15 on the other, resulting overall in 0.3%, from which 80% we transfer to the providers of liquidity. So this API for the pools that we are maintaining on each and every chain, it is not guaranteed. It originates from the amount of transactions and people actually paying, and those fees are being distributed to the pools. So if you're sitting in the pool which is actively being used, then that means that you earn more money. So that's it. And we keep 20% of all those 0.3 fees as the platform, which I also think it is reasonable considering the amount of development work that we are doing. But the majority of that, it is being shared with the liquidity pools providers. And in future, I am considering the DAO model when the owners of liquidity pools, those that are the most active, would be able to somehow affect that price change and the fees. So let's say that you own a lot of funds on Polygon, for example, and you're taking the majority of the pool. So you can do one of two things. You can either vote for minimizing the fee to make sure that more people are using that, or if you want more money to earn, you can vote for, increasing the fee. I mean, reasonably increasing. But if you're doing it the way that for average users it becomes too expensive, then they will obviously obviously stop using that pool because it's going to be too expensive. But the concept here for me as the founder is that I don't want to make those decisions myself. Like in this liquidity provision and balancing of the pools, I want the market to do that. So I want the market to find this proper percentage, this price equilibrium that would be good for everyone.
Got it. Now, you mentioned something super interesting in the beginning there. If I got it right, you said that users can choose which asset they use as a gas token for a part of the fee, right? Can you speak a bit more about that?
So we've got this part of development also from back in the days when we were running the old bridge, because the traditional architecture for the bridge is that you need to send the asset, you need to sign the transaction, and then you need to sign another transaction claiming the asset on another chain, which means that if you are sending, again, let's take USDC example from Ethereum to Solana, if you're doing that for the first time in your life, that means that probably you would not have the SOL on Solana in your Phantom or Solid wallet to finalize the transaction. You just have no reasonable way to get that because you're using this wallet for the first time in your life. So first, what we did in Allbridge Core, we started finalizing the transactions for users. So we will take more of ETH as the gas. We will convert it to SOL and we will sign the second transaction for you on your behalf to make sure that you will end up receiving the asset no matter what. But we thought that it is not really enough, because even if you end up with USDC on your wallet and you still have zero gas, you will not be able to later send it anywhere. So we introduced now this part that we call changing the gas. You can include more gas in the transaction and we will airdrop you the gas to your wallet on the destination chain. So that means that you will be able to operate with this wallet if it is just created right now. And the later part would be that we want to make sure that the users are not only able to use the gas token, but they can take the part of the stable coins, receive less stable coins, but those stable coins would be converted to the gas there, which I think would be the super user experience. So let's imagine you send in 1,000 USDC, you will receive, let's say after all the bridge commissions and slippage and whatsoever, 980 or 970 USDC, but you still don't have the gas token. So you can agree to receive 950 USDC, but you will end up with USDC and with the gas. And it would all be bound in the same transaction.
Now, I want to speak a bit about just general business drivers right now. What would you say are the main drivers or challenges, of course, for Allbridge at the moment?
I am always worried about the cybersecurity issues, because we know that the bridges have this sort of reputation for being hacked. And it is a bit sad for me. I mean, each and every time I go to some crypto conference and people ask, what do you do? I say, I run bridges. They say, those that get hacked. So we cannot ignore cybersecurity. We're doing a lot of cybersecurity audits. We're trying to do a lot of tests, but still it is one of the issues that concerns me each and every day. Apart from that, because we're in the business right now with transferring stable coins, whenever we've got this black swan, like the one we have recently seen with the USDC, it is the moment when the stable coin is not exactly that stable, and it dramatically affects the operations. And I think that we managed to do just fine over the last weekend when this whole situation happened, but I still have been worried. And I also have the experience. I mean, I've been using actively UST back in the days. So the good thing is that USDC sort of retained the peg and everything calmed down. But I also remember those days last year when UST basically went to zero and there was no way to restore the peg. And Terra Luna ecosystem, it never actually went back. I mean, they tried with Luna, the new one, but I think no one is really using it anymore. So that is like the problem of a stable asset losing the peg and affecting all the other stables on the bridge. It is really a problem that we are facing. And I have been, I've been receiving a lot of requests for adding other stable assets. For example, we are looking into Frax, we're looking into Meme, we're looking into a number of others. But I'm always really careful about adding the asset, because whenever one asset loses the peg, because of the architecture of the bridge, that all the liquidity pools are linked through the core of the bridge, it can affect other users and it can affect other liquidity providers. And it is one of the reasons I really want to decentralize the governance for the bridge. Because if, let's say, tomorrow I decide as the founder to add the asset and things go wrong, then the crowd would ultimately blame me for that, right? Now, if the liquidity providers, those that have the skin in the game, they vote for adding the asset, it is now a collective decision that we have been all part of. I mean, I would still probably get my share of hate if things go south, but it would be easier to explain that, right?
Yeah, it shift at least a portion of the responsibility to to others as well. I think that's a good plan. But let's speak about security, because you raised that, and I don't think there is ever a more important topic than security in crypto. So at a bit more of a detailed level, can you describe what your process for developing new contracts look like and what practical actions you are taking to ensure the technical and economic security of Allbridge?
So we have currently five different audits from 4 cybersecurity companies. And I think that in the future, we plan to continue that. Other than that, we try to cover our smart contracts with as many tests as possible. So in case something goes wrong, we will be able to identify it at the early stage. Some of the processes, some of the architecture that we are building, we already think about cybersecurity in advance. So for example, when we were designing the cross-chain explorer for our bridge, we specifically created it as the separate entity running on a separate server to make sure that if we need to do some troubleshooting in the bridge, the explorer for the transaction, it would not be within the same entity. So we will be able to see the information there and trust this information to verify what is happening in the bridge. So that's just one of the examples of the things that we are doing, but we really are trying to, have this approach. We acknowledge the fact that we can get hacked, and we try to live with that, doing all the necessary precautions. It is the same right now. We have a large discussion within our company. So if the stable asset loses the peg, should we have, for whatever reason, it could be either the stable asset losing the peg or the liquidity pool being drained by the bad actor. So should we have a kill switch, automatic one, that stops the breach the moment it sees that the peg goes down for whatever pool, like 10%. It is one of those things that can be helpful for our users, maybe frustrating too, but in the end of the day, I think they will say thanks for that.
Very well said. But I mean, defining those risk parameters is always, they're complex. So it's good that you're thinking about them. Now, so from like external parties, you use a lot of auditing firms, and internally, of course, you spend a lot of resources on focusing on security. But just in general, what does the team building Allbridge look like? You gave good background on yourself in the intro here, but how about other core contributors?
The founders of the company, we founded together with my partner. We sort of own it 50-50. He is responsible for everything related to the technical development. I'm responsible for everything related to business development, including marketing, financials, investment relations. More than I would, probably want, but this is like sort of we manage the risks together. Of course, we do the decisions collectively. Now, the company today consists of 20 people, and 11 of them are related to the technical team. 9 aren't. That includes community management support, marketing, lead generation, and partnership division.
Got it. Now, before I wrap this up with a final question, I thought that in addition to Classic and Core, which we've been covering now, I know that you also have a Bridge as a Service product. So do you want to speak briefly about that as well?
We definitely can include that in the interview. It is not like a big secret. It just, this product specifically, we created for the companies that wanted their own token to be bridged between the chains. And let's say you are launching your project on different chains at the same time, and you want to make sure that the liquidity flowing here and there. Now, it seemed to be a good idea, like 1 year ago, 2 years ago. Right now, we don't see too many tokens launches, especially we don't see token launches multi-chain. So I think that if we see that the market changes again and people are starting playing with token launches again, that may be something that can be potentially needed by the market. But today, to be fair, it probably would be the least on my list of the priorities. I am myself more interested right now in solutions related to cross-chain privacy. So let's say if you have your treasury on Ethereum, for example, in USDC, and you want to distribute the funds for people in your company on Tron in USDT, which is usually more, a lot of companies, they use USDT for OTC operations and for off-ramping from crypto, then how do we make sure that we give this problem the reasonable way of privacy? Not, of course, turning into sort of the mixer, but you for sure don't want to see people how much who earns the other persons, right? Those are the things that can be potentially visible on the layer of messaging on the interaction with bridge smart contracts. So I'm trying now to prototype the encryption over the messaging for the bridge and sorting out this issue. That could be an interesting product. I'm not yet prepared to say that I'm 100% sure of that, but I think that by combining the bridging services with the privacy services, we can get into something really cool.
I agree. That sounds fascinating. But yeah, thank you, Andriy. This has been a super insightful session. And just to wrap it up, I want to ask that what's next for Allbridge on the mid to long term roadmap? I know you're thinking about that privacy aspect, but what else?
So apart from the privacy layer, so privacy, it is really interesting and important for me because I'm a big fan of privacy as the concept. So I don't want other people to look into my pockets, if I may say. Other than that, I am really enthusiastic about this feature when you can deduct the amount from the money you're sending directly to cover up for the gas. I think it is pretty cool in terms of, user experience. And last but not least, it is working on the number of other integrations with the chains. I'm looking specifically into launching for Allbridge Core Arbitrum next week. It would probably be the same time as the airdrop of Arbitrum goes live, and I expect to see a huge activity there. So we're sitting like 6 days, I think, from that day. And I'm looking in Aptos and Sui. I'm always exploring other chains that can be popular, which we can bridge to and provide this cross-chain functionality for value transfers. That would be probably my short to mid-term. Let's put it this way, like Arbitrum next week, fees deduction within 1 month, privacy thoughts and integrations within 3 months. And by that time period, I will be able to identify the next chains that the users may need. So I will be also actively working on integrating them too. If you speak to me what we're going to do like 1 year from now, I would probably not have the proper answer for you because this market, it changes so quickly and so dramatically that I prefer this lean startup approach so that we are not trying to build like this huge timeline for our development. We have some thoughts and concepts, but we are always reacting to what is happening there.
I agree. The lean startup approach tends to work in an environment like this. Thank you so much, Andriy, for this comprehensive overview.
Real pleasure being here. Thank you so much for this list of in-depth questions. It is really for me a pleasure to speak about those things that are important for me as the builder rather than discussing where would Bitcoin price go next or something like that.
Exactly. Well said. Yeah, we don't care about that either. This is the stuff we want to talk about. So thank you for participating.
Thank you so much. Real pleasure.